Remember Brian Vogel? Yeah, remember the guy that bragged how mean he was? Or how much of an asshole he was? You remember him? Yeah, that Brian Vogel. Well, he just pled guilty to his drug charges, and for some strange reason, he's been given this sweetheart deal for 5 years in prison and a paltry fine of only $7,000 in change. While Chase Harrison has been given 15 years in prison and a $413,000 fine. Makes me kind of wonder, why did Brian get such a sweetheart deal? I can call this a sweetheart deal by looking at the plea agreement and take a look at this highlighted in blue is everything related to the drug charges. That's what he's been sentenced on. And in the future will be what's highlighted in red is the Matthew Nicole murder. And so basically in yellow, you can see where he changes his plea from guilty to from not guilty to guilty. And it keeps going down. Count 1 and 2 ranges between 20 and 30 years with a minimum of 10 years. And to strip credit in that case, that's related to the Matthew Nicole murder. So they're stripping credit for any time served in jail when he's going to get sentenced to that. So let's keep scrolling down. We see that investigation costs. He got a $7,000 bill for that. Let's keep going down. It says strip credit, count 7. That's the trafficking cocaine, and count 16 is strip credit for that. So he's not getting any credit for time served in jail, and he's going to do 5 years with the Department of Corrections, meaning prison, with a minimum mandatory of 3 years, plus a $50,000 fine. Now, I looked at Brian's record, and he did have a clean, he didn't have any trouble that he's been in before. So maybe that's why he got this deal. I'm not sure, but I think it might have been that he's working with prosecutors or the police. I don't know. But this is a heck of a sweetheart deal, because what makes it a sweetheart deal is down in red, down at the bottom, because it says concurrent with case number 2127227 CF CFE, I believe that is. And that is the Matthew Nicole murder. Why is Brian getting any concurrent sentence with an unrelated case? It makes no sense. I think he's been doing some serious snitching, but that's just me, some ham and egger on the internet reporting what I feel. On May 19th, 2025, I believe, is when Brian will go to court and the judge will accept these terms related to both cases. But for right now, all we're talking about what he's agreeing to for these drug charges. Let's take a closer look at that plea agreement. Because on May 19th, 2025, Brian's going to have a rude awakening. So let's take a closer look at his plea agreement, because we look at the case number for 27227, it's first degree murder, and the maximum sentence says life. See where it's strucken out? And it says the actual Florida law, whatever. And then the second one, he could get life for the maximum sentence. But let's scroll with 10-year minimum mandatory for each one of those. So down below, the second red highlighted area for count 1 and 2 ranges between 20 and 30 years. Well, that's not true, because above it says it could be life in prison. And basically that line could be stricken out and say life like it does above. But the only thing that's pertinent to that is to strip credit, and that he'll be on lifetime probation. And so he will get to serve his time concurrently with it. But, this range of 20 and 30 years is not true with a 10-year minimum mandatory. Above, at the very top, it says the actual Florida law says life in prison, not 30 years, as what he's probably been told by his attorney. It'll be interesting to see what happens on May 19th, but just remember what he did. You do the crime, you do the time. So I called Brian's deal a sweetheart deal. And the reason why I called it that is I went to Florida's laws and I looked up what's the statute on the minimum mandatory sentencing guideline. And here we go. Right here, it's the Florida statutes for 2024, including 2025. And this is section 775.087. And this regards felonies. And here it is, the felonies that are listed. I'm not going to read through all this, but any person who's convicted of felony, and it includes murder and home invasion robbery. Looking at page 2, we get very specific down to the brass tacks of what Florida's 10/20 life law is. And at the top is Section 1. It has to deal with, highlighted in yellow, says just the possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. You will get 10 years in prison. That's the minimum amount that you'll get. On Section 2 is if you discharge that firearm, you'll get a minimum of 20 years in prison. Section 3 is if you discharge that firearm and that discharge caused death or great bodily harm to anybody, you'll get 25 years, which is considered life. Does this sound familiar? It should, because this is Florida's 10/20 life law. And so Brian discharged that weapon with the silencer to kill Mako, and he knew he was going to do it before he set foot on the property. Ergo, he should be sentenced to a minimum term of imprisonment for 20 years. How is he getting this sweetheart deal? This is not fair, and it is not just by any standard. Well, at least that's what it seems like to me. One thing for sure that will happen is on May 19th, 2025. That's where Brian will go to Judge Spicer's courtroom, and the judge will either agree to the plea agreement or the case will proceed as a trial. And if it goes back to trial and Brian is found guilty, let me tell you, remember at the top of that plea agreement, it said that he could face up to life in prison. Waste the court's time, you're going to get some time, that's for sure. And life is more than likely what he would get. In closing, the reason why I made this video, it's about two things. Number one, it's about Brian Vogel and his drug charges and the sweetheart deal he's got going. And then also about the murder of Matthew Nicole and his faithful dog, Mako. Brian needs to be held accountable, and this is justice for Matthew and Mako. And I'll scream it from every mountaintop I'm ever going to be on. This is justice for Matthew.